Alrighty, so now the 2022 MLS season is over and we have crowned a champion. It's pretty much time to start doing some off-season material and also some materials that's going to be related to the World Cup, which, believe it or not, it's going to happen soon. I mean, the World Cup is less than 2 weeks from now, and I'm definitely very excited to see it, albeit I know there's going to be a lot of controversy that's going to be surrounding this World Cup, but if you take that controversy out, I'm pretty sure everyone is excited that the World Cup is once again going to commence. But today we are going to do a video where we're going to do one last emotion index. So I do this every single year right at the end of the season, where we do a final emotion index where we look at each of these fan base and what they feel about their team. Are they happy about what their team did, which is here at the top tier? It's been a great season. They either won some silverware or exceed expectation. Are they in the second tier where, they definitely met expectation and had a decent season? Or are they at the third tier where it was kind of a very mediocre, kind of meh kind of season? It could have been better for them, but it could have been a lot worse compared to some of the teams that is fine here in the bottom tier, which, speaking of bottom tiers, the fourth tier is basically one of them. It's the category that for every teams that have underachieved or had a season to forget both on and off the pitch, this is going to be the category that they belong. And then the very bottom tier is basically a team that admits that, we never had a shot to begin with, and there's definitely going to be some teams that is going to be in that category. Teams are kind of like on rebuilding or just a throwaway season that is going to find themselves in this category. So, as always, let's start with alphabetical order. We're going to start with Atlanta United, and there is no doubt Atlanta has underachieved this season. Now, obviously, I know Atlanta fans will talk about the injuries, and yes, injuries definitely play a huge part of this team. I mean, they were pretty much at one point losing guys to ACL injury and having season-ending injury, and basically guys suffering long-term injury at a weekly basis. And for teams that had to have that problem pretty much every single week, I mean, it's hard to, of course, make it to the playoffs. And I even mentioned there's a time where I'm not sure what Atlanta did to piss the injury guards, or maybe the amount of winning that they did in the first couple of years is maybe not pleasing the MLS gods in a way where this is kind of maybe punishment for that, or just kind of payment for what they did in the first couple of years. But for Atlanta, it is definitely a season to forget. And I would say that compared to this year, to the one that it was in 2020, where, remember, that was a year that they did not make it to the playoffs and things were a mess. I mean, I feel like this season, you could say that this season is equally as painful as the one in 2019, if not worse, because now heading into the offseason, there is so much question about this team. I mean, the first big question, obviously, is what's going to happen to Joseph Martinez. It is pretty clear that he's probably not going to be back for this team, and that, they just lost probably the last connection in terms of a player that has been with this team since day one when they came into MLS. And then you also have the factor in terms of the front office, which, my goodness, that front office, and we mentioned many times with Carlos Bocanegra, there's a lot of Atlanta fans do not like him. Like, he is pretty much one of the most hated men right now in Atlanta, and that there's question, is there going to be some changes in the front office, because it doesn't matter what they do in terms of some of the moves that they have been making, most of them has turned out to be huge bust. And that, again, this is a team that I think is a perfect example of what happened when sometimes buying pieces and spending a lot of money doesn't always lead to success. I mean, there's a reason why when you're, of course, trying to buy some pieces in your team, you want to spend your money on players wisely, because if you don't spend it wisely and basically just kind of wildly throw in money and hope that it'll work, you basically have a situation that Atlanta has, no matter what amount of players that they have signed throughout this tenure, ever since the downturn of them winning MLS Cup, and ever since Tata Martino left this team. That's what we get with Atlanta United right now. Now, looking at Austin FC, it's been definitely a great season for Austin. I mean, in many ways, they definitely exceed expectation. I mean, yes, in the end, I know it was kind of a little bit disappointing the way that, in the conference final, they pretty much just got completely blown out the door by LAFC. But at the same time, when you look at this season for Austin, and after what we saw in last season, I mean, there was a sense that maybe this team could be ready to compete for playoffs. I mean, maybe they could be a team that's on the bubble of competing for the playoffs. We didn't think they were going to finish second in the Western Conference, and we especially didn't think that they can go all the way to the Western Conference final. Consider, again, a lot of those guys on that team, they have no playoff experience, and it's just incredible how they were able to make their march all the way to the Western Conference final. Like, at some point, there was even people saying that, are they going to do the same thing that Atlanta United was going to do, which is somehow in the second year they're going to win MLS Cup. And I argue if Austin was able to do it, this is even more impressive than what Atlanta did, because at least that team that Atlanta United has, we knew that was a team that could be destined for greatness, and that was not what we thought with this Austin team. Even though there were some hints and some pieces that of course is the case. So yeah, there's no doubt Austin fans are very happy with the season, and it's gonna be interesting to see how next season is gonna be, because I feel like if they can add some more defensive pieces onto this team can definitely be an MLS Cup contender, and that you could give a lot of credit to what this Austin team has done, and especially in this front office, really building a team in just such a rapid fashion to a way that it's already going to potentially be a regular competitor. Now, moving on to Montreal. Yeah, for Montreal, I think they're right next to Austin too, where, in some ways for Montreal, they are also a team that basically have exceed expectation. And also, by the way, if you wonder why exactly Montreal is in third, well, that's because I did go on the website where I basically look at every team in alphabetical order, and since Montreal, they start with a C because they are, after all, named CF Montreal, even though I'm still not used to calling them CF Montreal. That's why they're going to be on third of the list. But yeah, for Montreal, this was definitely a season where, even though we knew that they were going to be a dark horse, we didn't think that they were going to be a team that is similar to what we saw with the Colorado Rapids last season. Just kind of have an incredible season, eventually getting themselves into the second seed. But unlike Colorado, they were able to get themselves a playoff win, and that, again, when you look at this team, as much as it's been a great season for this team, there is that concern of the fact that, like Colorado, with this front office, knowing the fact that they're going to be selling out some big pieces in the winter transfer window, especially one of their most important pieces in Georgi Mihailovic is not going to be part of this team. You wonder if this was the best shot for them to make noise in the playoffs. But at least for now, I'm pretty sure Montreal fans are over the moon in terms of the season that they had, because, again, the season that they had this year is equally probably the best season that they had. And although, yes, they didn't go as far as what we seen in 2016 when they went all the way to the Eastern Conference final, when you look at how this team is in the regular season has done, it was miles better than they have ever done in their franchise history. Now, moving to Charlotte FC, and for Charlotte, you know what? I'm going to say Charlotte is here too. And I know it's crazy to put a team that didn't make it to the playoffs to be right near the top of the Emotion Index when look at teams that how their season is. But I think Charlotte fans have got to be happy with how the team play. Yes, I know they eventually fall short in terms of the playoffs, but the fact that they were in this playoff race to begin with is nothing short of miracle. And I mentioned many times of the amount of adversity that Charlotte fans has to deal with their teams in terms of just really coming into the league with them being shorthanded, and then multiple front office member getting let go and decided to resign before days were going. And then not to mention once Miguel Angel Ramirez, which we thought at that point that was really the last decent pieces and the last hope to really maybe keep this Charlotte team to be where they are right now, was fired. We thought this team was going to torpedo in a way where they're going to be stuck in the bottom of the Eastern Conference and have an FC Cincinnati type of expansion season. And not only the fact that of course is not the case, but they ends up to have a respectable finish. And again, I really think when you look at this Charlotte team, if they can maybe add one or two pieces into this team, they could be looking like what Austin was last season. Because I feel like one of the key thing about Austin and why eventually they had such a successful season is that they started to add some pieces and really build a foundation of being a team that could be maybe a team that might sneak up on everybody's mind, that they maybe are ready to be a playoff contender. And again, with Charlotte if they can, of course, do so. And that's a big if because, I know a lot of their fans will remind people that the front office, they have been making some really interesting decision throughout this expansion year. We'll see whether if that, of course, would change and that, they do make the right move. They could be like Austin FC last season, heading into the second year, and a team that you thought maybe they might just be once again good enough to compete for the playoffs. And oh, by the way, now all of a sudden they find themselves near the top of the Eastern Conference. Now we go to Chicago, and for Chicago, yeah, this has been kind of the pattern for Fire fans that they have to deal with for pretty much the past couple of years. And that, I mean, when I did this video, I think last year, talked about where Fire fans feel about their team at the end of the season, I might as well just kind of copy and paste what I said last year, where it was another disappointing season, the season of underachieve, and they eventually gonna have to blow up the core, which they did. Yeah, it happened again in this one. I mean, this was just another season where, again, this is just a pattern for the Fire. Every time this team maybe give you hope of them doing well, and then they just immediately collapse. And when you have that kind of situation, it's hard to fix, because again, when you look at this team, you gotta say this team should be better than what they are right now. And I think this year they're probably not going to blow it up, because I think they're going to give Israel Henriksen another chance, and they're just going to hope that maybe the core that they have, or maybe add some more pieces, can really get them to the next step. But that's the big question. Can they, of course, get to that next step, and can they for once actually find some consistency where, this year they kind of found some consistency at time this season, and then they also find times where they have consistency of just sucking in for a very long time. And when you have these kind of pattern where you're in a good form, and then you're in bad form, and then you're in good form again, and especially when we are in the playoffs race right now, we're not in the playoff race, but how tough it is to make the playoffs, you just cannot have those kind of form and expect to make it to the playoffs. So it's another season to forget for Fire fans, and another season where Fire fans are really questioning the front office in terms of some of the moves that, of course, didn't quite work out for this team. Now moving to the Colorado Rapids. Again, it was a season where, I would say for the Rapids, we knew that they were going to suffer a bit of a letdown this season. And I know after what happened last season when they finished in the first in the Western Conference, I know a lot of people will say it was a fluke kind of season and that there was a lot of overachiever in that team. And I know this year probably it has kind of proven those people right, where they find themselves finishing, I think, in 11th in the Western Conference. Actually, I'm not sure if that, of course, is the case. They might maybe finish a little bit lower than that. But yeah, this was a year where for the Rapids, really, again, they kind of look like the old Rapids team that we seen before, a team that, just they're able to get home wins occasionally, but then when it comes to the road form, yeah, that's when things, of course, turn out to be bad. And not to mention the fact that last year, one of the reasons why they were so good is that they always will have someone that, of course, can step up in terms of scoring a goal. And in this season, in some extent, Diego Rubio kind of did that. I mean, a lot of people didn't know the fact that he actually scored 15 plus goals this season and was really kind of carried the team. The problem is the fact that he was kind of really the only guy that was able to score those goals. And also, not to mention, in the defensive area, they were definitely much more sloppier than what we saw last season. And a combination of the fact that Robin Fraser just unfortunately unable to work his miracle just like he did last season, and that's why you get a team that finished with a disappointing season. And another year where Rapids fan once again complained to the front office of the fact that of all the cheapness that they have been trying, of all the Moneyball approach that they tried, it has not worked. And that's kind of the thing with Moneyball, because if you want to go with a Moneyball approach, you need to, of course, make sure you get everything right, and you got to make sure that you get players that clearly believe in the system and clearly play hard, which we saw that last season. That's just not the case this year, and as a result, that's why the Rapids find themselves so low in the standing. It's just another year for the Rapids fans to realize that they better hope that eventually they might get a better front office, because the front office that they got has clearly not invest in a team that has the potential of potentially to do good things. Moving on to the Columbus Crew. Yeah, for the Columbus Crew, I mean, it's safe to say that it was definitely a season to forget, and especially in the latter part of the season and the amount of blown leads that they have suffered. I mean, I can mention a lot of issue with the crew, with some players even underachieved this year, and also the amount of times that they draw points at home. But really, I think if there's a quick way to summarize this season, if you're a crew fans of how they feel about the team, it was a season of underachieve. It was a season of just complete mismanagement by Caleb Porter, especially in the latter part of the game. I mean, when you have the likes of Lucas Zarian and Cucho Hernandez in your roster, and you still don't make it to the playoffs, that there's got to be something more wrong about that. And again, there's definitely something wrong with this crew team, and it's just, again, the multiple time that they aren't able to close out games, and also the multiple time where their defense once again started to look like the defense that they were last year, which is just kind of inexplicably collapse or just give the ball away in a very bad position. And add on top of that, that's where you get the crew suffering probably one of the most disappointing season, if not the most disappointing season that any team, of course, has had this year. Because on paper, when you look at talent-wise, this team should be a playoff team, and maybe it can even be a team that could be competing for the Eastern Conference crown. But now moving to DC United. Yeah, this was a throwaway season for DC. I mean, I think DC fans would even agree that, as much as I want to put them on this, it was pretty clear that this was a throwaway season. Like, as soon as they decided to get rid of Hernan Losada and realized that he was kind of the up and coming kind of Gabriel Heinze type of head coach, and then of course once again they didn't really commit too much in terms of adding pieces, and not to mention the front office once again kind of make some interesting and just kind of dumbfounded decision by basically bring back Chad Ashton and maybe be their interim head coach to just openly admit that, yeah, this is pretty much just a throwaway season, and then make an even more interesting decision by getting Wayne Rooney back, which I guess, again, maybe bringing Wayne Rooney back as a head coach is just ways that they hope that maybe the fan base will be happy, because he is definitely a fan favorite, but at a level where, you know, again, I'm talking about with Wayne Rooney, he's a head coach that has had limited experience, and with the mess that this team has got themselves through, I don't think he can even rescue this team and can get this team to maybe get themselves into a miraculous run in the second half of the season, and that of course was not the case. And what do you get in the end is a team that basically won the wooden spoon this year. And again, there is not a lot of hope for DC heading in to the future, especially again now that you're committed with Wayne Rooney, and you hope that maybe he of course bring in some of his guys to add into the pieces of this team. Maybe they can of course do well, but there's just still so much question in terms of this team, and there's just so many pieces that they have issue where, again, it's a season where it's not only a throwaway season and it's another season for rebuild for DC, but it's kind of a season where, you know, they're probably one of those teams that out of most of those teams are near the bottom of the standings, and can admit that this was a throwaway season and a rebuild season. They don't really have a good direction of what kind of rebuild are they going to head into. Now, moving on to FC Cincinnati. Boy, what a year FC Cincinnati has had. I mean, easily, I think they have exceeded expectation, and I mentioned probably the most surprising team this season. It's going to be FC Cincinnati, because, like I said, heading into this year, yes, getting Pat Nolan was definitely a great hire, and even getting Chris Albright from the Philadelphia Union was a great hire too. But what's interesting coming into this season is that when you look at the Cincinnati squad, they didn't really change from last season. It's almost exactly the same squad as last year, and yet, despite the fact that they had the same squad, they were not only being a more respectable team, but was actually being a playoff contender. And who knew guys like Brenner, who looked like it was a huge flop from last season, turns out to be one of the best scorer in the league. And who knew Brandon Vasquez would be a guy that turns out to be a guy that definitely had potential to do some good things, to just being an absolute goal scoring machine. I mean, I'm pretty sure Atlanta United are probably regretting the fact that they decided to let him go to Cincinnati, because again, he is a guy that he's going to be the main force, and especially with that big front three for Cincinnati too, with Acosta, Vasquez, and Brenner. That could definitely be a front three that can lead things going. And keep in mind, even though I know Cincinnati did make some move during the summer to improve the team, even then they were still doing well in the league, and they were definitely playing way above where expectation was. And this also goes back to what I said about Pat Nolan and the job that he has done. He has stopped that kind of culture of always finding a way to lose games. And that I really think last year, as much as I know last year was bad for the Cincinnati team, I really think that was just a year where maybe a combination of just them being very bad and also just bad luck kind of contribute why they had a historic bad season. But we've seen before where if you have a brand new season where you can kind of wipe that out of your system, and start fresh again and start to win some games, then you definitely can build in a winning culture. And again, like I said, I feel like Pat Nolan has really built that winning culture. He has I wouldn't say he has completely got rid of that times when Cincinnati sometimes collapse, because or that culture of Cincinnati always find ways to lose games, because there's times where we saw them do it this season too. But he's definitely got rid of most of it, and to a point where you don't ever think that this team is just gonna simply collapse every single game like what we saw in the first 3 years, and always find a way to break the hearts of their fan base. So I'm pretty sure for Cincinnati fans, what a year this has been, and that I guess this is what it feels like when you have a team that is actually amazing and a team that doesn't just suck every single year ever since they came into the league. But now moving to FC Dallas. Again, for Dallas, I think, this is a season where, again, I know it was a season where they once again weren't able to move on into the Eastern Conference Final, and they still have trouble in terms of getting out of the second round or getting out of the first round. And obviously losing to your in-state rival Austin is definitely going to hurt. But at the same time, this season with the way that with the departure of Ricardo Pepi, and that there's question, is Jesus Ferreira, of course, is going to be a decent replacement. And for once, is this team finally going to sign some veteran presence that doesn't turns out to be a huge bust? Well, the answer to that question is that yes, this is finally the season that we found out that Jesus Ferreira is just as good of a replacement as Ricardo Pepi, though just don't ask what happened in the latter month of the season, especially in playoff time when he pretty much disappeared. But also the fact that, the likes of Paul Arriola, Alan Velasco, those guys that they add in the last off season, that I thought it was a smart move that Dallas, of course, made. Yeah, they definitely, it turns out to be a huge boom for this team, something that we have not seen in previous year. And not to mention the fact that I've also heard this team has done a much better job in terms of marketing the team, and you definitely see this season that there's more buzz in that FC Dallas crowd than what we see. Like this fan base that I know there's been a lot that have said about this fan base not being one of the best in the league. I don't think that's the case after this season. I mean, you definitely see that the stands were much more filled compared to previous season, and that there's just more of an excitement to this team than we have seen before. And that, again, this is just kind of the beginning for this team, and that I think after this season, even though I know it's disappointed that they didn't get past their ultimate kind of narrative that they have been going through the past couple of years, which is somehow finding themselves to finally get past the second round of the playoffs. They could definitely have a chance to do so if they can, of course, add some more pieces. Though again, there's that question of if Jesus Ferreira is going to be sold this winter, or maybe even heading into next season. Then what's next? Like, who is going to be that guy that's going to be step up? Something tells me it's probably going to be a guy coming out of the Dallas Academy, because we know that Dallas Academy basically funded half of the starting 11 that the U.S. men's national team is potentially going to take to the World Cup in Qatar in just a couple of weeks. But now moving to Houston. Yep, it is a throwaway season. And it's one that, again, I'm going to put some of these teams in the throwaway season where you think that maybe their fans are going to be proud of that, but no, they're not. And again, Dynamo fans are not going to be happy the fact that, even in a year that was a rebuild, it was just a year where they really didn't make any progress whatsoever. And again, there's that questionable decision of deciding to get Paulo into this team. And I will say that if there is one thing I maybe will be kind of sugarcoating a little bit, I thought this team at times on the road have done much better than previous season, and at times have shown a little bit more fight than we have in previous season. But unfortunately, the result doesn't show. And at the end of the day, the result is what it all matters, and that's why this Dynamo fan base once again continue to be restless with this team, just kind of stuck in that cycle of just being a bottom feeder every single season. And that I know in previous year that I mentioned this team refused to believe that they're going to go through a deep rebuild, and that I think now that they kind of start to admit to do so, and that at times you're going to definitely have those growing pains in terms of that. But again, just look at this season and the result that they of course have. I don't think you can say a lot of people will, a lot of Dynamo fans will say that they maybe made some progress and that things are going to be better. I mean, in terms of standing wise, they kind of made a little progress. At least they didn't finish dead last in the Western Conference again. But the bottom line is, with them firing Paulo Nakamura and then potentially even do the unthinkable and even the definition of insanity of bringing in Ben Olsen. Oh boy, that's not gonna it's not gonna be going well for this Dynamo team, and especially for this fan base, knowing the fact that most likely when I do the Emotion Index again next season, they'll probably find themselves in this spot again. But now moving on, we are gonna go to Inter Miami again. Even though I know Inter Miami is M, they start their first letter, of course, is I. And for Inter Miami, I think definitely it was a season where they have exceed expectation. I mean, who knew that a Phil Neville team can actually be he's able to lead a team to be a playoff kind of team, and who knew that a team that pretty much blow up their entire roster and kind of start from scratch again, and that it almost felt like it's expansion 2.0 for Inter Miami, that this time not only they got it right, but they got it right in a way where they made it to the playoffs. I mean, there were a lot of pieces on this team that they of course kind of scrapped throughout this offseason, and that again you thought that maybe this was going to be a bottom feeder of a team, and it turns out not to be the case. I mean, who knew that Leo Campana, who at first it looked like it was a huge bust of a signing, would play decently, and who also knew that Gonzalo Higuain would just simply carry his team and really give it his all one last time before riding off to the sunset. Now, obviously, with those momentum that this team, of course, got, let's see whether or not if that's going to continue. And especially with them losing Higuain this season, and that they're fully trust on Campana to be that guy going for on the attack. We'll see whether if that is going to work out. And not to mention, when you look at this team, I still think that maybe there was definitely some pieces on this team kind of overachieve a little bit, and that in terms of quality wise, there's no doubt that I know a lot of people said coming into the playoffs. Some say that they might be are one of the weakest team coming into it, but I don't think their fan base would care much, because again, with the amount of frustration that they had gone through with this team for the first couple of years, and now finally break through, and also the future kind of definitely looked bright, because with the way that once the sanction finally lift them, it seems like they have a vision in terms of making some decent signing. Yeah, I think this won't be the last time we'll see this Inter Miami team to be fighting for playoff position, or even getting to the next step of being a playoff contender. But now moving to the LA Galaxy, we'll see for Galaxy fans, it was another year where it's kind of a very, very meh kind of season, but at the same time, it definitely did not end it the way that they were hoping for once again, which is getting eliminated in the hands of their intercity rival. And just like what I said about the New York Red Bulls last season, and how the Red Bulls fans probably are sick to their stomach, the fact that they had to see their biggest rival lift MLS Cup for the first time while they're stuck at with no MLS Cup. I would say that maybe in some way that could be the same for the Galaxy, although I will say that some Galaxy fans will say that, well, yeah, they of course finally won an MLS Cup, but they still have the most MLS Cup, and they'll definitely need still mention the fact that, yeah, no, at least we still have the advantage in terms of the amount of MLS Cup that is won. And not to mention, for this Galaxy team, it wasn't really a total disaster ride that we thought it was last season. I mean, getting the like of Ricky Pooch has definitely been a game changer for this team, and we'll see whether heading into the next season with him continue to improve, and maybe finally for once that they get it right on the defensive end, this team can get things going. But obviously, I know a lot of Galaxy fans will say that this feels like it was kind of a bit of a mess season. It's a season that definitely could have been better, but at the same time, it could have been a lot worse considered the slide that they were going through in the middle of the summer. But now moving to LAFC, the champion of MLS Cup, and now you're defending MLS champion. I mean, it's no doubt that they are at the top of the list. And the simple thing to say is that they won silverware. I mean, as long as they, of course not only win the Supporter Shield, but win MLS Cup, they definitely meet expectation. And that, again, this year, it was MLS Cup or bust for this LAFC team. And that not only they were able to finally get that MLS Cup, but the fact that they had that pressure of MLS Cup or bust, and that we've seen so many teams aren't able to follow through, that still kind of impressive of them eventually getting that and then getting over the hump. And now again, once again, like NYCFC, ending some bad narratives that we always talk about them of not being able to come clutch when it really matters, and come clutch in some big moments, because they definitely did throughout this whole season, and especially in that MLS Cup. But now moving to Minnesota United, and for the Loons, yeah, there is no doubt, I feel this season was a very vanilla season again for the Loons, where it's a season where things could have been a lot better, and definitely in a year where, again, that elimination that they had in the hands of FC Dallas, it was a very conflicting kind of elimination emotion. And what that basically means is that on one hand, I want to take the sentiment route and say that, at least this team definitely gave it all, and that, unfortunately, in a PK shootout like that, where they eventually come out on the losing end, that's just kind of the way it is. But then on the side where maybe some fans would be a little bit more critical of the team, say that once again this team underachieved, and especially once again this team looked like they peaked way too soon with the way that, while they had a good stretch in the middle of the season to get themselves all the way up third in the Western Conference, it's what happened after that. I mean, the slide pretty much all started at the end of August in that throwaway game that they lost to RSL, and then it just keep going down and down and down to a way where they're almost missed it to the playoffs. And again, I think in the latter part of the season, we basically saw the same issue that popped up in the first part of the season, where they just simply cannot score enough goals, and that, and also doing that bad losing streak. It was just not only they cannot score goals, but they also cannot defend. And now again, just like the Galaxy. Well, actually, I wouldn't say for the Galaxy, but really for this team, I just simply don't know what's gonna happen with this team in the future. Like, next year, I would hope that maybe things would be better. But then, you also look at the fact that, I mean, there's definitely some issue on the attack of whether or not eventually they are going to find a decent number 9, because let's face it, as much as Luis Enrique definitely had a season where, especially during the middle part of the season, he was definitely lights out. For the most part, he definitely did not live up to the expectation. And then you also got to look at the back two, and on the defensive end, where this back line core is definitely started to age badly, and especially the Dibasi injury really derailed this team. Again, you just got a question in terms of this team and what kind of future they build. I mean, I just feel like they're now starting to maybe be in a situation where I talked about this before, where sometimes when a team is just good enough to make it to the playoffs, but then when it comes to playoff time, that's when they're just not good enough to go deep into the playoffs. And I think that is just as bad as missing the playoffs, in my opinion, because you're basically stuck in a mediocrity wheel that, that's got to be very frustrating if you're a fan, especially for me, seeing this team where I don't know if next year is going to be anything different, unless if they're going to make some big signings that kind of will work out for once, because most of the signing that this team has made has not really worked out. I mean, the only good signing that actually turns out to be a big bang was Emmanuel Reynoso, and that's really kind of what this team has been depending on, at least for the past couple of years. But now moving to the next team, Nashville SC. Again, for Nashville, I just feel like this was another season where, it could have been better and it could have been worse. And I feel like it's more on the point of could have been better, and a team where, once again, it was a team that led heavily on Hani Mukhtar and Hani Mukhtar only, and hence that's why, of course, he eventually won the MVP this season. But again, it could have been a lot better in a way where the defense this year definitely did not play up to expectation. And then not to mention the fact that, when it comes to their home form, oh boy, it was an absolute train wreck throughout the season. And it's also kind of just looking at the style that Nashville, of course, has played, where, again, as much as I know it has kind of worked out, at least for the first couple of season, and I mentioned that Garrett Smith has done a good job in terms of that, you maybe are starting to kind of question it a little bit, especially with the way that he hasn't really kind of changed that style, and maybe teams have started to kind of figure it out. That's when this team started to maybe find themselves in some vulnerability, and we definitely saw it in that losing streak down, or, well, not in the losing streak, but in that winless run that was very similar to the one that the Minnesota United was on, but eventually they kind of rebounded and get themselves at least all the way up to 5th in the Western Conference. But again, this is a team that there's a lot of questions still surrounding this team. Can the style that they play is going to work out? And also, can they finally found a legit attacking pieces besides Hani Mukhtar? Because I feel sorry for Mukhtar. He's literally single-handedly carrying this attack at a point where, he's going to continue to become one of the best number 10 in the league. But again, it's just similar to the Minnesota situation where, it's just kind of a one trick pony in terms of the attack, and that if you can shut him down, then, that's Nashville is pretty much non-existent on the attack, and we saw it in that playoff game too. So if you're a Nashville fans, yeah, you could be very frustrated, especially with the way that this team plays at time, but especially with the way that they are able to win home games, which if they were able to do so, there is no doubt this team would have been a lot better than they were this year. But now moving on to the next team, the New England Revolution. Yeah, this was a season of underachieved for the Revs in an epic fashion. And, the Revs have had some disappointing season in the past, but I would say that this is definitely right up there as one of the most disappointing season, in a way where pretty much they just never got it together. Like, every time we thought that maybe this Revs team was eventually going to get it together, and especially that they, of course, added some pieces this off season, you would think this team should have been enough to make it to the playoffs. And yes, I know losing Adam Buxa during the middle of the season was tough, and it looks like losing the likes of Taja and Buchanan might have even hurt them more than we first thought it would be. But still, when you look at this team, they should still have enough talent to get it done, and they just aren't able to do so when there's times where it looked like maybe this team is going to be back on track. And now heading into next season, and we know Bruce Arena, I think he's going to be under his final year of his contract. This is going to be it for Bruce Arena. Can he maybe push the team one last hurrah? Because again, when you look at this team, I mean it's a team that it's kind of interesting in a way where you could say that maybe they might have enough to make a push to make it to far in the playoffs, but will they have enough? And that you just also wonder, when they won that Supporter Shield and had that record season, was that really their best opportunity to win MLS Cup? And we've seen it before where, you could say that maybe you peak a little bit, but maybe you are a little ahead of schedule and you had a record amount of season, but you got to make sure that you got to take advantage of it, because who knows if that's going to continue in the next season. And I think for the Revs, they just weren't able to take advantage of it, albeit I know they kind of got screwed over in terms of the scheduling when they had won the Supporter Shield last year, and that they weren't able to play a playoff game for so long, and that really caused them to have some problem. But at least one beacon of hope is that at least they still have Carlos Gil, and I know he's going to be a guy that's still going to produce some magic and hopefully get this team right back on track in terms of the team that compete for MLS Cup. Because like I said, this team has the talent to do so, but can they of course get back to that level? But now moving to NYCFC. So I think for NYCFC, it's interesting to see the season. I think I'll put them here, and actually I will put them here because they of course won some silverware, and I'm gonna put every team that won silverware basically on that. So there's gonna be some team that I'll mention. I'll put them on there, even though if they didn't win that silverware, they probably would have been here. And really for NYCFC, I would say that if they didn't win that Confidence Cup, I'll still say that they're probably right here, where this was still a great season for NYCFC, and especially them going all the way to the Eastern Conference final, and that they were kind of also having a very similar season that like they did last year, where things were not looking well, and then they started to go on a good run near the end of the season and ride that momentum heading into the playoffs. They almost did it again, but again, we all know what happened in the Eastern Conference final, where the old narrative started to come back, where NYCFC have found some hilarious way to beat themselves in the playoffs and find ways to choke in the playoffs, and they definitely choke big time in that last 30 minutes of the game. Really just kind of threw away the game and gave up free unanswered goal to kind of lose the game. But still, I think one thing you got to say for NYCFC, and something that's promising for this team in terms of their fan base, is the fact that they can still be a decent team, even without Tati Castellanos, and at least Nick Cushing. In some way, he's definitely ride the ship a little bit in the latter part of his interim tenure, and that again, it'll also be interesting to see whether if he is going to get the permanent basis, because he's only there for interim basis, and whether or not if maybe NYCFC might be going after a much more experienced head coach and a guy that knows how to get it done, like what Ronnie Delia did in last season, and also for at least for the first part of this season. Because I think when you look at this team still have a lot of talent, especially some decent young pieces, where I think they're going to be back in terms of being an MLS Cup contender. But now looking at their intercity rival, the New York Red Bulls. Yeah, it's another season to forget for the Red Bulls in a way where I mean, at least this year they definitely finished better than they did in previous season in keeping that playoff streak alive. But again, another playoff fatality loss, and that it's almost like it's the same old, and that it's just getting to a point where Red Bulls fans they almost getting into a point where they almost simply don't care about this team, because they know what's gonna happen every single season. And it's sad to see that, especially when you also look at that playoff game too, where we have seen some incredible playoff atmosphere this year. The Red Bulls hosting FC Cincinnati was definitely not one of those, and you just kind of almost had a feeling that fan base know that once they get to the playoffs, they know what's going to happen. They're probably going to once again find a way to lose the game, and they did exactly that. And although I know that game against FC Cincinnati, it was not a favorable matchup for them, for teams that they feel like maybe this is the year to finally end that narrative of potentially finally getting over the hump and not kind of had a That's So Metro kind of moment. Nope, they once again are back into that. And again, as I'm pretty sure not only it's a season to underachieve, but it's also another season to forget, where it's basically the same old. And what also sucks if you're a Red Bulls fans too is that I don't know if things are going to change too, because I have a feeling next season is going to be the same thing again, especially with the way that, again, I mentioned with the academy of this team, which used to be one of the best academy in the league, produce some good talent. It has started to run dry out of that, and not to mention most of the signings that they had in terms of senior player, they haven't really kind of turned out. And in some way, I would say that they're kind of like FC Dallas was a couple of seasons ago, where once the academy kind of pipes started to run dry a little bit, and they always keep whiffing on signing veteran present and signing guys that are not coming out of the academy. They got stuck in that mediocrity view, and that's exactly where the Red Bulls have been stuck on for the past couple of years. Now, for Orlando City, again, I'm going to put them up here because, they did win a silverware. So if they win a silverware, they, of course, have to be on the top tier. And I know Orlando City fans that will say that this year, they've at least were able to finally get their first ever silverware in franchise history. Albeit, I know we'll definitely, people will definitely not forget about the whole Spygate situation that they had, and not to mention the fact that out of all the team that won an MLS Cup, they or not MLS Cup, but won a U.S. Open Cup, Orlando City probably have one of the easiest, at least for the past couple of years of playing Sacramento Republic, a second division team. Though I will say that they'll argue that that was a Sacramento Republic team that looked like they were in destiny of potentially winning the whole thing, which I don't blame for their argument. I think it's a legit argument where when you look at that Republic team, it looked like that team had all the star lining up to them to be destined to become the first non-MLS team to win the U.S. Open Cup. But besides that, that really is only the highlights of this Orlando City team, because if they didn't win that U.S. Open Cup, they would definitely be here. And they would. It was definitely a season to forget. It was a season where it was a frustrating year of inconsistency, finding no balance whatsoever on the attack, and most of the signings that they had in the offseason, except maybe in some extents, Facundo Torres turns out to be a huge boss, and also with them at times battling injuries with some of the key players, and you get a team that, again, once again, they did make it to the playoffs, but it was almost like last season all over again, where they just did it good enough to make it to the playoffs, but they didn't do much out of that. And it's getting to a point where you can definitely see there's frustration in Orlando City fan base, where, and this is also where we're starting to see in Oscar Pereira, where as much as he has done a good job in terms of getting teams winning U.S. Open Cup, and at sometimes maybe winning Supporter Shield and have decent year, I feel like if you keep him for too long as your head coach, things will definitely start to turn stale, and we're starting to see again the same situation that he had with FC Dallas, where during the end of near his tenure, things really started to take a turn for its worse, and that's why Dallas decided to get rid of him. And it feels like that could be the same case for him with Orlando City, because again, he done a great job for this team, at least when he came into to be the head coach of this team during the COVID year. But then now they're starting to kind of becoming a team where they're good enough to make it to the playoffs, but they're not good enough to of course go deep into the playoffs, because they just don't have the quality to do so anymore. But now moving to the Philadelphia Union, and for the Union, I would say that as much as I know it was a heartbreaking season in a year where it looked like they maybe finally were able to win MLS Cup, and especially out of all the teams that have lost MLS Cup, I think you gotta say the Union probably suffered the most heartbreaking MLS Cup loss out of any team. Like, I would say that this was even more heartbreaking than how the Portland Timbers lost MLS Cup last season, because at least for the Timbers, they actually gave them, they looked like they were not going to win it, and they were just came in a couple of minutes to lose it, but eventually they of course forced extra time, and of course they did lose in a PK shootout. The way that the Union came literally in 5 minutes of stoppage time minutes, and if they just simply could just not just park the bus and just decided to defend like they or done well in terms of the defensive front and close out games like they've done throughout this entire part of the season, we would not be having this discussion of the fact that they might have suffered the most heartbreaking loss out of any MLS Cup. And yeah, I think that goal that they gave up in the 128th minute, that goal kind of really broken them. I mean, some will say that maybe Daniel Gastek slip penalty kind of broke them. I would say it's that goal that they of course conceded. You can definitely see from this Union players, they look like they were already ready to celebrate and ready to lift the trophy, and little did we know that they just conceded again and force a PK shootout. But that being said, if you not include that painful moment that they suffered in MLS Cup, I think throughout the season it was another great season for this team, and it's also a season where you can definitely see that this is a team that can be sustainable in terms of being an MLS Cup contender, because again, I know this offseason they're probably going to lose some key pieces. Kai Wagner is definitely one name that I can think of that they're going to probably lose this offseason as they're going to sell him for a big amount of money. But when you look at this Union core, it's still pretty much intact, in that I think they're going to once again go for it again next year. And especially the way that if there is maybe one positive outlook, if you're a Union fans, you can come out of this, is the fact that at least every year they made some progression in the playoffs. I mean, they went from getting eliminated in the first round, then getting eliminated in the Eastern Conference Final, and then now this year they got eliminated in MLS Cup. So if we can follow that kind of projectile, maybe next year is the year where they finally win MLS Cup. But now moving on to the Portland Timbers. If there is a team that basically is the definition of a season to forget, it's got to be the Portland Timbers. And I think this season not making the playoffs actually wasn't the biggest story out of this year, and the on-field performance really wasn't kind of the biggest storyline of the season. The biggest storyline this season has to be the off-the-field situation, the multiple sexual kind of misconduct that was going on with the front office, and especially with the ownership. Really kind of just was a huge distraction to this team. Now, we have seen before where teams have played through those kind of distraction before that is not related to on-field product, and they still thrive. And I'm not sure, in some extent, maybe that kind of play into the on-field product a little bit, but yeah, I mean, you got to say that the off-the-field situation was just bad enough where, anytime when you have a season where I think maybe Timbers fans can see that the off-the-field situation neglect what happened in the on-the-field situation, which was pretty bad, and that this was kind of the year where, when you have this approach where you somehow finally found a way to get a second half resurgence to go, but eventually it's going to kind of run out of luck. That's kind of the case for the Timbers, where they just kind of run out that luck at the end, and especially those two crucial losses at the end of the season kind of really broke a year where you thought that this team was going to be maybe getting themselves back into MLS Cup, but also like I said, just the off the field situation that is going on, that pretty much just neglect what we saw of the on the field situation. And at least in some extent they have tried their best to kind of repair it, but it will definitely take time to do so. And especially, I know a lot of Timbers fans are still saying that while their GM is rightfully removed from their position, they want their owner to be the next one to not only take the responsibility, but actually decided to sell the team after all the situation that was going on off the field. But anyway, moving on into the next team, and that is RSL. This is tough for RSL because, I mean, I guess they met their expectation and had a good season. I mean, it's tricky to kind of look at RSL this year with the way that, if you're a fan of the team, I mean, after that Cinderella run in the Western Conference Final, I mean, I kind of feel like the expectation can't just simply say, oh, let's get ourselves back into the Western Conference Final or even make it to MLS Cup. Because when you look at this RSL team, this team basically still lack a lot of quality, but the reason why that they were still able to win games is because they continue the old motive of the team, of course, is the star, and they always find a way to do so, and they did it again this year, able to sneak into as a 7 seed. And again, when it comes to playoff time, it looked like they were going to do it again. I mean, that game against Austin, it looked like they were going to defeat them. They were 2-0 up, albeit, yes, they did give up a goal in the first half, but they were literally a couple of minutes away of potentially moving on to the next round and continue the Cinderella story. But as we know, that was not meant to be, albeit in maybe a controversial kind of circumstances. But really, for this year, if you're an RSL fan, again, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm gonna put them having a good season, because I think also with them losing key pieces like Damir Krylak and Bobby Wood, it really kind of killed their chances on the attack. And also, you wonder with the way that, yes, they have new ownership in the Ryan Smith and Dave Blitzer kind of ownership that take in this team. Are they going to maybe be a little bit more ambitious this off season? Because I think maybe this season they'll be giving a pass with the way that they're still trying to get into this team and maybe fund this team in a way where they can make some big move this off season. But it's going to be interesting if you're an RSL fan, hoping that this off season may be the time where they get into the next level. Because if they can't do it this off season and make those big moves, then maybe RSL fans will have question of, well, what happened to all that beliefs of the fact that we're going to finally spend some money and maybe be a little bit bolder in terms of moving on into the next step and be a team that could be not only competing for playoffs, but maybe even getting themselves back to being an MLS Cup contender. And now moving on to the San Jose Earthquakes. Yep, it's a throwaway season. Don't really need to explain a lot about the Quakes. We knew it was a throwaway season from the beginning when Matias Almeida was still in charge of this team. And while this team eventually did the right thing to fire Almeida, it was way too late. And, they, again, suffer the same situation that DC has where they basically decided to hire interim head coach and looked like maybe things were going to fix. And then it kind of wasn't. Though, at least I will say for the Quakes compared to DC, at least I think the Quakes, there are definitely some glimmer of hope. And I really hate the fact that I have to say the word glimmer of hope and use that in the same sentence as the San Jose Earthquakes, because every time when I see this team had some hope, they find ways to crush it. But there's a chance when you look at with them getting Luchi Gonzalez and especially with this academy for the Quakes and started to kind of maybe trying to copy the same formula that FC Dallas and even the Philadelphia Union is trying to do. And not to mention when you look at the on-field product, it's actually not as bad as some people as they can just simply fix this defense. I think this team can be a playoff contender. But again, it's that glimmer of hope. It's that hope. The old saying, it's the hopes that kills you. That's what I think of this team heading into next year, and that again, I am gonna have low expectation again for this team next season. But when you look at this year, let's just say that let's forget this year actually exists, because we knew this was a throwaway year from the beginning, and that of course was exemplified of them finished last in the Western Conference. Now moving on into the Seattle Sounders. Again, Sounders are gonna be right up here, and again, if they didn't win the CCL, I would say that maybe they will definitely be in a year where it was definitely a disappointing season where they underachieved, and unfortunately that playoff streak eventually came to an end, and them missing the playoffs for the first time in franchise history. But again, them winning CCL and becoming the first MLS team to do so and able to finally conquer that mountain really kind of neglect what was just a very, very kind of disappointing season that this team has. And again, it's almost feel like, the old saying when you basically make a deal with the devil in terms of winning something that no one has ever won, but it kind of comes at a big cost. That's what the case for the Sounders. I mean, they really sold a lot to the MLS gods in terms of doing something historic, which I think every Sounders fan will definitely take that. But if that also means that it's going to be a bad season where they're going to miss the playoffs for the first time in franchise history, I guess maybe so be it in some sense. I mean, like I said, it's just such a year where, again, it's multiple things. It's injuries. It's also just underachieving that was going on, but I would say mostly because of injury. I mean, losing João Paulo was a huge miss in a way where it kind of started to have the snowball effect, and then near the latter part of the season, some of their best players like Rui Diaz started to get injured, and even Christian Rodon at point started to get injured, and they just never able to recover to a way where they kind of just suffer a classic example of what happened when a team goes deep into CCL, where it just kind of suck the life out of this team and suck any last amount of energy of them to potentially compete for MLS Cup playoffs and continue the streak. But now moving to Sporting KC. For Sporting KC, this is going to be a tough one, because again, if you ignore what we saw in the first half of the season, and maybe even in the beginning of the second half of the season, it was actually a decent season for Sporting KC. But unfortunately, again, them making those summer transfer moves, that turns out to be a huge boom for them and getting them back into a spot where they look like could be a playoff contender. They would have made those moves maybe in the winter transfer window, they would have been easily a playoff team, but simply just them not able to make it. And again, just heading into the beginning of the season where it was getting so bad at a point where Sporting KC was even openly questioning whether Peter Vermees should be deserved to be fired for this team. Yeah, that's how bad it has gone for this team. But like I said, with the great run that they had in the second half of the season, and we've seen teams where they have a good run in the second half of the season, they can follow up into next year. Austin is a great example of that. I think this team, of course, would be fine, and I think in the end, Sporting KC fans, as much as they'll be very disappointed that this was a season to forget for them in terms of where they're in the standings. I did mention that out of all the teams that missed the playoffs this year, they're probably going to be the most equipped to make it back next season. But now moving to Toronto FC again, it was definitely a season to forget. And you know, TFC, they're basically a prime example of another team that just trying to spend some money and hope that eventually, of course, it will work, and it just doesn't work. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they just have no defense. Like, again, you know, most of the spending that they have has been mostly on the attack. And yes, you want to definitely spend some big money on the attack, and of course, bring the likes of Insigne and Benedeschi definitely plays in their hand. But how many times we said before, if you don't have a defense in MLS, this is not like what we've seen in a couple of years before. Nowadays, you really simply need to have a defense that can be decent enough to compete for the playoffs. And when you don't have it, then yeah, you get what happened to TFC, where this was a team that simply just don't have enough to make a run near the end of the season. And once the attacks started to kind of dry, and the goals started to dry up a little bit, and the defense continued to ship goals left and right, that's what we saw with this team. And I guarantee that if you're TFC this offseason, I swear, if they simply don't fix that defense and maybe look into it, then this is going to be the same as it is next year. And they just basically wasted another potentially excellent year that Insigne and Benedeschi could have on this team. Because pretty much everything on this team is looking very looking like a team that could be a MLS Cup contender, but that defense is not, and it won't be unless if they address it, and we'll see whether if that is going to be the case. Now moving on into the last team, the Vancouver Whitecaps. Again, I will say that this was a season where, you know, they belong in this tier because they did win silverware. I'm going to count the Canadian Championship as a silverware, even though I know some fans might not say that. But really, I think for the Whitecaps, that has to be with the way that this is, I think, only the second time that they have won the competition, and this will get themselves into the CONCACAF Champions League once again. And that, again, even though it was a season that I would say that if they didn't have that Canadian Championship season, I would say that they're probably right around here, where it could have been, they definitely kind of underachieve a little bit. And that, you know, as much as I feel like the Whitecaps kind of had a similar year as last season, where they kind of make a miraculous run to make it into playoff position, and that this year was kind of similar with them somehow finding a ways to stay alive in the playoff race, even though many people said that they were done for, and that they took it to the very last day. They just kind of ran out of that magic. But like I said, Whitecaps fan will just say that, well, at least they won something. At least they won some silverware, and that's something that pretty much 22 other fan base aren't able to say after this season. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And as always, have I ranked some of these teams a little bit too high in the emotion index, or did I rank some team a little bit too low in this emotion index? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.